You're listening to the Coach's Journey podcast, exposing the struggles and celebrating the successes in the life of coaches who are action takers and creating authentic impact in today's world. Whether you're just starting out, expanding your reach, or exploding your impact, you're in the right place right now. Stay tuned and be sure to subscribe to this podcast. Now, here are your hosts of the Coach's Journey podcast.
Welcome to the Coach's Journey podcast. I'm excited to be back. I just was off because I had a child recently, so I'm back. I'm Daniel, and this is Faisal. You probably have been following us for some time, but if you haven't, we'd love to have you. Today's topic is really, really important one for coaches. If you don't think it's an important topic, you definitely need to listen. It's active listening, and we're going to talk about the 3 critical components of active listening today. And Faisal, why don't we start with why this is an important topic? Why is this such a critical topic for coaches?
What?
I said, why is this such a... That's funny. Good job. I didn't even get it. I know you were listening. Why do we pick this topic today, Faisal? Let's tell them.
So I think this is one of the foundational areas of coaching. If you cannot be an active listener or a deep listener, as Rich Lidman might say, then it's very hard to be in a coaching session. And it's actually incredibly much more difficult than you think before you do coaching or before you get into doing coaching consistently. And even to this day, after almost 10 years of doing this, I still feel challenged at times, especially in those days where you're not at your best, when lots happening in your life, and you know that you need to just show up for that client or for the group of clients. And if you don't know how to show up there with full presence, you don't know how to show up there to support the client, and you're stuck with your own thoughts, your own challenges, you don't know how to process your own energy, more than likely, the client feels it on the other side. And what does that affect? That affects whether or not that client stays with you. First of all, how they feel in that session, not cared for, not supported. You brought a bunch of your own stuff into it. And longer term, not getting referrals, not getting clients. And if this continues long enough, you'll probably start seeing your clientele drop and your reputation along with it as a coach. So what's on the line? Your whole
everything
as a coach, your whole identity as a coach, your business, everything is on the line when it comes to just this one critical component of the coaching process, which is active listening.
Yeah, I don't know any coach that's listening to this who doesn't want to improve the quality of the coaching experience for their clients, right? So that's what we're here to talk about today, active listening, because that's like probably one of the best ways you can improve the quality of your coaching is get better at active listening. And so if you can think of how you found this podcast today, maybe somebody shared it with you or you personally found it on social media or something like that. The only way we can provide this valuable content to people is by word of mouth. So if you ask, all we ask is that you pay it forward to another coach that you know, because everyone needs positive growth. We coaches can do together much more than we can alone. So please do share it. And we will be getting started here.
Awesome. All right. And before we get started, actually, one last thing. Those who are listening on Facebook Live, we do have a masterclass coming up on the sales process, client journey process. And if you don't have that process clarified for you, you are probably struggling to get clients or you're struggling to get consistent clients. So make sure you show up to our masterclass, which is on March 4th at 12 p.m. Eastern. Just type #sales and we'll give you access to that. If you're listening to this outside of Facebook, reach out to us. We'll give you access to it. Even if you're outside, you just will need to join our group and that's it. But let's jump in.
All right. So let's talk about we got 3 components, right? So let's talk about the first one. And you might automatically include this, but I want to make sure we explicitly state it as one of our items, which is presence. And I want to spend a little time talking about what presence means with you, Faisal, because I feel we probably have slightly different perspectives on that. But like presence, it's like such an important part of active listening, even though when we think about active listening, we're not actually always thinking immediately, oh, your presence. But that's like a foundational piece of active listening, isn't it?
It is. And the way I look at presence is that I look at it as energy. And sometimes people get confused focus with presence. I don't look at it like that. I used to be myself confused with the two. but focus might be an aspect of presence, but presence in itself is, I look at it as energy. And the way I look at it, even when I'm talking to you, is that if I'm present fully, I'm literally encompassing you within this energetic container around you and around myself. So you actually literally feel it like a hug or like a safe container to be in. And I think coaching sessions are a container in themselves. And I think this is why people say it. But the starting point of that is actually both sides feeling it, but it starts from you, is that you need to feel that energy around your client. So I'm literally holding my client energetically with me as we go through this session. So that to me is presence.
I love that. I love that. And part of presence, so energy is actually almost a better word for presence, but you can have terrible energy and you can have terrible presence too. And so like to me, like the presence, yes, it's an energetic thing. It's, are we feeling each other in the session? Like, or more specifically as a coach, is the client feeling that presence? So, but I would also go as far as say the presence starts before the session, before you even get into your session with your client. Like you're going to be present in your session, but it starts before the session, not only with like your preparation, but your intention around that and the energy that you brought into your session from what happened right before the session and even what happened yesterday before the session and how you slept. There's all kinds of things that feed into that. So you can optimize all these different levels of presence and intention to be present as part of like establishing that presence in your session.
Yeah, for sure. So as soon as you said that, it triggered my intentions for coaching sessions, which is I have 3 words: serve, energy, challenge. I've been saying it for a long time. So as soon as right before I go into this, first of all, there's preparation involved. I think energetic preparation is much better. Your physicality, your energy, just grounding yourself a little bit more. And of course, doing other preparations for the client besides that. So if I literally had 5 minutes, I would just energetically prepare myself and set my intention, which is serve, energy, challenge. And interestingly, I found myself saying that throughout when my thoughts go in different direction. I would say serve, or if I see myself getting caught up, and it happens a lot in sessions where you find yourself in a space it's like, why am I asking this question? Why am I talking? Why am I going in this direction? And it's split-second decisions, but that intention keeps pulling me back. But so part of my intention is energy, which energy to me is presence is a huge part of that. It's not always, oh, I want to be energetic. It's actually a lot of times it's I want to be fully there so they can feel that I'm there. And I might be the only one in their life who is giving them that presence. Just that is probably more valuable than most coaches think.
I wanna add to that, because when you can practice being present in your coaching sessions, the benefit that you get in your whole life is you get more present with other people. And I actually feel like I practice being present in my life with my family members, with my friends, and that helps me be more present in my coaching sessions. So if your life is a presence practice, if you intend to be present, if you bring that energy to your whole life, not just your clients, but also to your clients, you're going to raise your entire level of energy and presence in your life. And then that's the new baseline. So your clients are going to feel that automatically. And then you have practices on top of that. What's the edge of presence for you? Like what's the next thing that you're working on for presence for you, right? And so as an example, for me, I know like my edge of presence is being a lot more intentional with setting intentions before I go into interactions with not just my clients, but with other people in my life. So if I'm getting ready for an interaction with somebody, like, do I take that even a few seconds to set my intention of how I'm going to show up with that person and just make that automatic? Like it's still not automatic with people outside my clientele, but I want that to become automatic. That's an edge I'm pushing in my life to raise that baseline of presence, which will help me in my coaching sessions as well. Because then what's the next edge? How can I end up being more and more and more of a present person?
Yeah, I love that. You actually reminded me of one of my clients who's in my group program. I actually like these kind of clients. He's very challenging. So he doesn't just take things, and he's very critical to what I share. And he kind of he takes it as that. I personally love it because I want to see what the result will be. And I've had 2 clients like that have been very like overly critical. Initially, to help me dealt with my own insecurities. Like, okay, he's actually questioning the process, what I'm saying. One of the things he said, we were actually talking about presence in that group call, and I was talking about intentionality, exactly as you were saying, is that as you show up with more intention with your relationships, any part of whether it's with your family members, team members, business partners, whoever, makes you better at it, gives you better skill sets to be present in those times that really matter, versus you just doing that in those times and not being present. But his response to that was, and that was his challenge. He's like, but nobody does that. And he's like, I don't think that's practical. I don't think that works the way you're saying. And then we went deeper into it and asked them, are you talking about everybody? Are you talking about yourself? Or are you talking about what you ideally want to do? And I told him, like, you're right. Most people don't. That's why they don't have the life that they actually ideally want.
How
What do
many
you
people
want?
are present to you in your life, right? Like that's,
Yeah.
if you think most people don't do it, it's probably because they don't.
Yeah. And
But
also it's also a projection of his experience as well in that moment. And he's sharing that. And I don't need to be judgmental of that. I need to just ask. It's like,
it's good data, right? It's good data, right?
it is. I mean, almost everything that comes up in our life, in our coaching sessions, it's data for us to see what's happening, how we're showing up. I have a lot of feedback from my wife, my kids, where there are times where I'm not fully present. I'm not fully there. And I'm like, okay, I had the intention, but I lost track of it. I had the intention, but I lost. What can I do differently? One of my favorite things for my kids is, especially my older daughter, Elia, she'll be like, Baba, you're not listening. It just hits me like, like, shoot, okay. Can you repeat that? I'm gonna make sure I'm with you. And she'll say it. She catches me really fast, probably even more than my wife.
My little son, he grabs me by the face and turns my head to him and then says what he wants to say to make sure
Yeah.
that I'm listening. It's so
Yeah.
cute.
Which also I want to share this point. We live in a world where distraction has become normalized. Like it's very normal for people to just I think it will look crazy to somebody from a couple of decades back or even a decade back to watch people being on their phone while they're talking to somebody or doing some, because we're in the world of multitasking, we're in the world of distraction. It's for some, and I hate it personally, it's become normalized for people to be distracted while they're with other people. And so we're also dealing with a collective challenge there, and which makes it actually really easy for coaches. If you can give them like 20-30% more presence than the people in their life, that all automatically gives them a different experience of their world. And to me is that you're modeling that for your clients as well. How can they show up with their team, with their family, with other people? And if they can feel it, which is the second component of this, if they can feel your presence, then they know that it's tangible, it's real. They don't have to think about it, they feel it. And we're like, can I give this experience to the people around me? And it will come up in conversation. It will, like, almost every time it comes up, is like, why do I feel this way when I'm in these sessions? And almost every time when clients share is like, no, there are clients I have, they would be like, I don't look forward to the sessions, but when I'm, because it's painful a lot of times for people. When I'm in it, and like, I needed this. Like, I don't know how this happened. Yeah. And when we go through the conversation, they start to realize why this is so important, because this is their space to actually a gift for them to grow.
Yeah. Well, actually, so point one and point two, being present, I think there's a big part of being present that is like the mechanics of like non-distraction and non-interruption, right? If you are in a coaching session and you've set up your environment so that's that you cannot be interrupted as best as possible, and you are personally undistracted during that time, then you are creating the foundation of presence. That's part of the intention you set. And then the mechanics of actually doing that. You set up your environment to be that. Just being that alone will make a difference to your client. They will notice that. But there's other things that you can do, which is point two. How aware are they? How much can they feel your presence? You can do that, and they still might not feel your presence at a higher level. You can ramp up them feeling your presence by actually dialing into them and how you operate with your body. For example, if you're on video, for example, or if you're in person, do you maintain eye contact? What is your body doing? Are you indicating your understanding? Are you repeating the things that they say to make sure that they've heard you, understand them, and are you demonstrating to them that you're present in a way that they can feel?
Yeah.
In addition to just the baseline, I'm with you, right?
The way I look at that, what you described, what hit me was that engineering your external environment and internal environment in a way so the client feels your presence fully. So whether that means that you need to get rid of your phone distractions and anything that might pop up, or any minimizing. There are times where you can't completely stop it, but minimizing it as much as possible and setting up the environment and actually letting them know that I'm fully present here with you and I want to make sure that everything is off. I do that in my group calls a lot more, but sometimes in my one-on-one calls I will do that too. My office is separate from my house, and I have the privilege to do that. There was a time I didn't. So when I was working inside the home, it was hard for me to keep presence because I had to tune out a lot of the stuff was happening. I don't hear anything, so that's helped a lot. But once in a while, somebody will come in, my kids will come in, they will bring food, or my wife will come in. I have to work hard to, and the best thing that I found is like, hold on 1 second, somebody just came in. I just want to make sure everything is good, and then I'll go back to them. So we don't need to pretend that all the distractions are gone, but I think we need to do our best to minimize it. And also then there are tools that come in for you as a coach, repeating it back to them, whether you're paraphrasing or you're telling them exactly what you heard. Actually, I had a session yesterday. It was a very difficult session for my client because it was around her relationship. And pretty much most of my session, I didn't feel like I needed to do anything other than repeating back what I heard from her. And it's just, this is what I'm hearing about how you're approaching your relationship with your husband. Is that accurate? Is there something else in there? And I just kept doing that. Pretty much, I think 80% of the session was that. And at the end, he's like, I don't think he, because her assumption was that her husband understands her. And they've been together for 25 plus years. But by the end of the session, he's like, I don't think he understands where I'm coming from at all.
Yeah.
But that came from me repeating it back because I don't think she was hearing herself when she was saying
Part of you
it.
being present allowed you to listen enough to understand and repeat back so that they heard what they said from somebody else, from you, from somebody being present with them, right? So they're clearly, if you're engaging with them and repeating that back, that's a form of active listening, right?
Yeah.
And that's why them feeling your presence in those kind of interactions is really critical, because people need to feel understood in your active listening. Because if you're active listening and they don't feel understood, there's still more work to do. Or you're not active listening, right? And then on top of that, there's a whole other layer of not only do they feel your presence and do they feel that you're listening, but then there's like, what do you create together? So like one level of that is what you just described, Faisal, where you're listening and repeating back with clients. But in a session I just had, what was it, last week, I'm thinking about, where the client and I were thinking about a particular problem. And we did the active listening that we just described, which is like clarifying the problem. That's, by the way, that's part of active listening too, is clarifying what they said. Is it this or is it that? What did you mean by that? And once you have clarity, all of a sudden that opens up a whole new layer. Well, I would still call active listening, which is collaborating and exploring, which is the third critical component, right? There's your presence, there's them feeling your presence, and then there's like the actual exploring and collaboration that happens at the highest levels of coaching, where you're actually working together to figure something out. And at this level, like, a lot of it comes from the client, but not all of it. The coach and the client can work together to figure something out, or to solve a problem, or to brainstorm. Sometimes I'm brainstorming with my client. In this session last week that I'm talking about, we were trying to figure something out about the way one of their business processes was working. And we kind of batted some things around, and then we started drawing on the whiteboard, and they're like, oh, I like that idea. So we went kind of in that direction. And there was like a lot of like, just like aligned and connected problem solving together. And we came up with a really great idea. And then they said, oh, this is what I'm going to do with that idea. So they took their action plan from the collaborative discussion, which is I would say another level of active listening.
Yeah, I love that. And again, I look at all this as different tools of active listening. So different approaches to it, which strategy, the collaboration, will require you to take different routes. Some might be brainstorming, some might be just repeating it back to them, some might be taking them in a helping them process something, some might be helping them making a decision in a different way. Whatever the tool that comes in, but there is a collaborative process that happens, but it requires you to be present. It requires them to feel it, for there to be that openness, for there to, when the openness happens, there's vulnerability and there's trust in there. So then you can go more to a strategy, which is why we added it at the third level. There are a couple of things in there just that can interfere with this whole process. One might be your setting. I've listened to a lot of coaching calls from clients, especially when it comes to notes and stuff there and their body language, especially when you're on video. So audio might be a little bit easier when it comes to this. I had one coach who only did audio calls, which I actually appreciated for a while, because I would actually go walk for those calls sometimes. And she would encourage that too. And another, or sometimes I wouldn't even look at the screen, walk around and think about it and go right on board. And I still have at least one client that I work with who it's completely audio. She prefers that. Yeah. But especially when it comes to video, I think it complicates. In audio, you're listening more to tonality, so you're very focused on tonal shifts and those things. But video makes it a little bit more complicated. I like the video piece because you're really looking at the body language. As a quick example, so when a client was sharing with me a couple of weeks ago, it was a very challenging thing, vulnerable thing he was sharing. He'd been working with me for 3+ years. He had never shared that with me before, and I could tell he had a hard time describing that. But when I repeated it back to him, I saw that it was mostly what I heard, but there was something missing. It was just his body shift, subtle shift in his body language that told me, he's like, I think I'm missing something. Is there something else in there? And then the actual thing came out, which I would have never caught that had I not paid attention to the thing. So the reason why I'm describing this, a lot of times when I'm watching coaches, when I'm listening to their calls, the way they write notes, whether they're doing this or they constantly look there, they miss things in the session. So I still take notes, less notes than before, because AI does a lot of that job. But I look at the clients while I'm usually doing this, if I'm taking notes. And plus, your body language posture matters. So there was one coach I gave feedback around, and I had some of this stuff too when I was starting out, where when he would be listening, he would like kind of lean back like this. So it would, when I'm watching, I'm like, it looks like you don't care at all. Like you're not into that. So it gave the impression, even though I didn't think that his intention was that, he was just didn't realize it. When I pointed it out, he's like, yeah, I can see why that would look like that, but that was not, and I understand, but it creates a challenge with there. And maybe you can elaborate on this piece too. So one is that, and this is a more complicated thing that could interfere with your presence and with your listening. It's your own thoughts. And I feel like that's more the advanced level of listening, and because it's been a challenge for me to grow through, is that when you're listening to a client, even if you have an intention, even if you're present, they say something, and something triggers in you that makes your mind busy, or you feel something, right? In the moment, you have milliseconds to decide which direction you're going to go on. If you lose control of that and you jump into that train of thought, or worse yet, you confuse that judgment that you might have with client's life and you bring that into your session, that derails the session probably more than anything else. And which means that how aware of your thoughts are you, your emotions are you, your energy are you in the moment, and can you shift even if you make mistake? That requires an immense amount of energy, I think, and training.
I agree with that. I totally agree with that. If, for example, somebody passed away, like this happened in a session recently, a couple weeks ago. Somebody said in their life that somebody passed away. My thoughts immediately went to a few different things. Like I have a friend who somebody passed away for them recently. People have passed away in my life, and so all these things come up for me. And then part of my bias is like, oh, they must be going through what I went through, or like, oh, I have something to share on this. Whatever the thought is. And so I've gotten better at being like, okay, this is not about me right now. Going back to Daniel's #1 rule, which is it's not about you, Daniel, it's about the client. And so those experiences can be useful in helping the client through these things, because I have had experiences that may be related. But right now, the client is sharing something. And so being able to, #1, put those to the side and let them go and not need to talk about it, not need to process it again, not need to relive it, not need to worry about any of my stuff, not need to worry about the people in my life who might pass away. Like there's so many things going on in my own heart and my own mind when somebody says that. Being able to take that in those milliseconds and be like, okay, got it, brain, put that somewhere else for now. Get back to whatever exactly this client is saying and be here with them and listen.
Yeah.
And then when they're done speaking, then there's a time to acknowledge or demonstrate that you've heard and understood what they've said, right? And not yet bring in your stuff, right? It's really easy to be like, oh, well, I had somebody pass away too. That is like not what the situation usually calls for.
Yeah, I love that. The only caveat I would say, there's a coaching model, compassionate inquiry. I really like their practice because I've been watching a lot of coaches in that area. They're actually taught, if you're affected significantly by something, if somebody, for example, shares what you talked about, a death in the family, and you feel it, and you had a death in the family or something, they actually make it a point to share that I'm actually affected by this because I had. Not to kind of talk about yourself, but more to make it them, because they will
There's
pick up on
level.
that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I was referring to is like all the thoughts that come in about all the things that happen.
Yeah.
Whether I'm feeling it is a different question, right? If I am like really feeling emotional, I let the client know, right?
Yeah.
Because they need to know that you're feeling them, right? And they need to feel you feeling them, if you know what I mean, right? Like, but I have I have a very like active brain, and I've learned how to just like take those thoughts and let them release them, let them go. Like I have tons of thoughts when somebody says about passing away, but if I'm not feeling it emotionally, it's just a thought, right? But if I'm really feeling like, let's say something's going on in my life and I'm like really deeply connected, sometimes I'll tear up in a session, and I let the client see that. It's good to let the client see what you're feeling. You're a human, they're feeling with them, right? It's having an emotional response for you. That's great to let the client understand that, because I think what that does for the client is it validates the fact that they're feeling things too. And it also connects us as humans, right? We're not robots. We feel things, you know?
Yeah. And one of my favorite sayings is, actually, it happens a lot with me when somebody shares something and it connects very deeply to my experience. It happens a lot with me. And I'll say that, and I know I need to share it. I can't hide that part. And I'll say that, there are times when I believe in God a lot more than I normally do. And those are this times, like, there's a reason why we're sitting down and sharing this. And I would share my experience, and those are some of the best sessions when happen, because there's an openness, vulnerability that happens, and then they open up just this thing. Like, it doesn't happen any other time. And it happens often for me, where something that I feel based on what the client shares opens them up, and it gives them the strength to share more, to go to the different direction. And
There's
that's
lots of times where sharing your own stories and can be super, super effective, I think, too. I do a lot of sharing of stories at the right moment in the right way, or as best as I can tell. Like I'm not leaving my stories out of coaching, because it's important. They need to be able to connect to your life too, right?
For sure. I mean, we can talk about this literally for hours. I think this is why I love coaches, because we can, like, these are the important areas to think about, and we encourage you to think about it. And we've come up with this framework around your presence, you feeling your own presence and being there, your clients feeling your presence, and then creating a container where you're collaboratively working with. And it's not just about listening to words, but looking at when you're present, you're looking at the body language, you're listening to tonality, you're listening to a lot more, and what's in between that was not shared than what you might if you weren't an active listener in the moment, or a deep listener. So, and I consider this a skill set that you build on. And I think we get better and better as we do this. And I think we all have room to improve here.
Yeah.
We'd love to hear your perspective on this. Please share how you've gone, what is your version of active listening, and how you've gone better as a coach, and what does that look like for you to grow? What would be the ideal next level for you? Please share that below, and in Facebook, or even in YouTube, or anywhere else you're sharing. We'd love to hear, and we'd love to respond and get engaged with you there.
And if you want to learn more about our community where we support coaches on questions like this, we have a weekly mastermind that we do where we discuss really important coach development topics. We have a coaching chain where you can gain coaching skills and feedback as a coach. We challenge, go to coachingmasterycommunity.com and you can take a look at our group. If you have any questions, send an email to support@coachingmasterycommunity.com. And we hope to see you next time on the podcast.
Awesome. And until then, hope you have an incredible day and week. Bye.
You're listening to the Coach's Journey Podcast.